everything.
Alright guys, we are back in Free Code Camp's responsive web design and starting applied visual design. Let's jump right in. Visual design is in web design. I was just thinking this is a very broad topic. Basically, we're going to be talking about color theory, animation. We're basically going to talk about how to make our web page cool and functional is kind of the gist of it. So creating visual balance using the text align property. Now what text align does is, let's go ahead and run this real quick. So what we want to do with text align is we want to center our H4 tag. So let's go ahead and find our H4 tag to set it to center. So it looks like we have it right here. So we're going to use text dash align. And we're going to do center. Let's go ahead and run that real quick so we can change. So see right here, now our Google text just centered itself. You also can set it to justify. And let's see what they want us to do here. So your code should use the text align property on the P tag to set it to justify. So let's go ahead and do the same thing here. Text dash align. Justify. There we go. And finally, we want to add now justify, I'm not too familiar with. I'll have to review that. It doesn't look like it tells us what it does too much. It looks like it spreads it out a little bit so that everything's evenly spaced and it goes down to the end of the line more or less. So finally, our A tags, which it looks like by accessing the class links. So we have it. We have to go ahead and create the class is created here. Links. We want to set it to the left. So basically, we want all our anchor tags to float to the left. Pretty straightforward. And we're going to use the text dash align left for that. Cool. So basically, what we need to take away is that you need to be able to have your text flow in the to the left, to the right, to the center, or just kind of cover it evenly. All right. You can also specify the width of an element. Your code should change the width property of the card to 245 pixels using the full card class selector. So we talked about width before. You see our full card here. Instead, we're going to do 245px. Now when we run our test, oh, the width property. Your code should change the width property of the card to 245 pixels by using the full card class selector. So, what is the problem? Let's reset this real quick. We're going to clear the code, and in here, we're going to set width 245px, and we're going to run it. You know what? Let me try zooming out real quick and see if that helps. There we go. So sometimes what happens with this, with your sizing, is when you zoom in, I think it kind of it messes with the CSS a little bit because it's probably detecting it on the page at 100% zoomed in. Now we're gonna go ahead and do the same thing for the height. So you can actually set the height of these as well. So let's go ahead and see the before and after. And I'm not going to zoom in till after here. I'm going to set this to 40px. Let's run our tests. You'll see the height of it. Now notice that the font size doesn't change, but the height of the element does. That's why we have a larger gap right here right now. So we're going to go ahead and change this back to 25 pixels. Because this is way too much height for that, right? So you kind of need to play around. I kind of like that they throw that in there because with CSS, a lot of it is, I don't want to say guess and check, but you want to see it, and then you want to see how it affects the other elements. And it's easy to kind of visualize this stuff, but it's easy to think you can visualize it, I should say. But in reality, it's always best to kind of see it and then make adjustments. So the strong tag is basically makes things bold. That's all it does. And we're going to go ahead and wrap our strong tag around the P here. Now there's other ways to do this, but right now we are, strong tag should be inside Stanford University. So we are looking for Stanford University. And notice how you can wrap these around individual words, as we're about to do with Stanford University. So we're going to do strong. Let me zoom in one more. There we go. And you'll see that now Stanford University is bold. Now you can do the same thing with underline by just using the U tag. And we're going to do that on the PhD students. So using the U tag like so, we can now underline PhD, excuse me. I think I said PHP. Students. Your code should have an M tag. So M is to emphasize the text. So no, we can underline text, we can bold it, and we can emphasize it, which if I remember correctly, basically means it makes it slanted. That's all it does. So we want to wrap around the P tag. So now we're going to have the entire paragraph tag nested within the M tag. And when we run it, you'll notice that all the paragraph text is now slanted. Now I don't know what the del tag is, so let's hang out for a second. It's the strike through text. I do know what this is. So you can also apply this in your CSS using text decoration -line through. However, if you wanted to do it as a text element, as a HTML element, it appears that you can do this as well. So we're going to put a line through, include the word alphabet in the H4 tag. All right, so we're gonna say Google Alphabet. And we are also going to go ahead and we're going to strike out Google. Is that right? So basically, del, you'll think delete, right? That's kind of the idea behind it. And now you'll see that Google is strike through in there as well. And again, if you don't know, this is one of FreeCodeCamp's dark settings. You can go into settings and change it as well. I personally prefer the dark setting. It's kind of easier on my eyes than the white, but it is a preference thing. So it's all the same code, all the same exercises and everything, but don't be thrown off that it is the dark mode, I guess. Which is really cool, by the way, because I don't know about you guys, but as a developer, the first thing I really do is get my IDE set up or my text editor set up to be in dark mode and to look to kind of look and feel better for me, because if it makes me less tired or it's easier for me to see things, it's easier for me to see my syntax mistakes, it's easier for me to see my code, I think it's worth taking the extra 5 or 10 minutes to do it. But anyhow, that's neither here nor there. So the HR tag is basically a horizontal rule. It's a line that goes from left to right, horizontally. So what we want to do is add this HR tag between the title and our paragraph. So what we're going to do, throw a simple HR tag. Notice how we don't have a slash on it. No, not needed, and you'll see that we now have this little line here. Now we're going to be talking about RGBA. So in the basic CSS, we talked about hex colors, we talked about RGB, and we talked about just putting a word value in there. RGBA stands for red, green, blue, and alpha. That alpha is our opacity. So if we want to make our color partly see-through, we can do that with relative ease as well. So what we're going to do is for our H4 class, which, do we have an H4 in here? No, we don't. Your code should add a background property. So we know how to add stuff to the page or to our CSS. So H4, we're going to set the RGBA, red, green, blue, to 45, 45, 45, and then we're going to put 0.0. And notice how I put 0.1. It's always going to be somewhere between 0 and 1, but One is it's not see-through at all. So let's go ahead and run this. And oh, we also want to add some padding. And we'll just go ahead and put 10 pixels all around it, looks like. And then we also... Oh, I'm sorry, background dash color. I forgot to put that. So the attribute is background dash color, and the value is RGBA. So sorry about my mistake there. The height property. So we're gonna set height. I'm gonna go ahead and set it 0px as well, and I believe that should do everything that we wanted to do. So now you'll see. Let's forget a second. You kind of see this partially see-through gray right here. Kind of off-center because of the padding and everything we're doing. Don't really sweat it. But you're able to have this partially see-through. It's kind of hard to see on white. It doesn't really look like you're seeing through much. But yeah, I promise you it's working. Adjust the size of a header versus a paragraph tag. All right. So remember we were talking about how the height adjusted the size of the tag. But instead, what we want to do now is actually adjust the elements height. What we actually want to adjust is the font size of the H4 element. So we want to make the font bigger. To do that, we use the font dash size property, and we're going to go ahead and set that to 27 pixels. And you'll see now that we have this nice big font there. Now the box shadow property is pretty cool. It will add a shadow to your elements to kind of give it a three-dimensional look. Now we're going to add a box shadow for the thumbnail ID. So let's see. We'll add our thumbnail ID right here. And remember that thumbnail or IDs are with hashtags. So in our thumbnail, we want to give it a box shadow, the above box shadow. A lot of stuff's going on here. So there's a lot of properties that go on here. Where you want the box shadow, what color you want the box shadow, and how much box shadow you want, top and bottom. So the offset here. Let's just read this real quick because I don't want to misinterpret it. There's a lot of parameters that go into box shadow. I'm actually gonna copy this so I don't make any syntax mistakes here. But the box shadow property takes values for offset of x because you need to set how much do I want it off of the element's x property and how much do we want it off of the y property. What is the blur radius, spread radius, color value in that order. So a lot of stuff goes into making your box shadow, but it's a pretty cool effect. You can see there's what eight inputs for this one attribute. And so now did you see the little shadow on the bottom here and the shadow on the left? That's what the box shadow does. It may be kind of hard to see in the video, but maybe if we do this, let's go ahead and just make this red real quick to kind of just make it stand out a little bit. So you can kind of see that the red shadow around the edge adds kind of a three-dimensional sort of look to it. Put that back real quick. Continue on. So similar to how RGBA works, where you can set the opacity, you can actually just set opacity of things directly. So we have our links tag here. And what we want to do is just set the opacity of links to something like 0.7. And now our links will be slightly more see-through. It looks kind of on here that they just become a little more gray, but they're becoming see-through. Now, you can also transform text to be certain things as well. So like say you don't want to actually have to type out, but you have a paragraph that needs to be all capitalized. You can do that. But instead of actually having to worry about going through and capitalizing everything, you can just use to uppercase. You can also capitalize things, or if you want transform me right here to be lowercase, you can use lowercase, uppercase. Capitalize will just do the first letter of each word, and none uses the original text. Initial uses the default value, but these are really the main three that you kind of need to know: lowercase, uppercase, and capitalize. Let's go ahead and go on. So we have our H4. So it's going to be text-transform because we're transforming the text. to be a certain way, and in this case, we want it to be uppercase. And now when we run it, we'll see that our alphabet is all capitalized. So the body tag should have the family name of Open Sans and a generic name of sans serif. So we had already talked about family names. So font family. The thing that you really need to get away from here is you're going to be importing fonts now, like Lobster and these other things. Open Sans is another popular one. And when you import these Google fonts, because they're not the same as the browser fonts, we actually have to put quotations in there to let it know that it's a font, or it's just a convention. It's just how it works. You need to do that. So we're gonna have our body here, and we're gonna have a font-family, and because Open Sans isn't native to browsers, we're just saying Open Sans in quotes. And you'll notice that we can actually just have sans-serif, sans-serif, like so, because this is native to browsers. And you notice of course the text changes as well. Set the font size of H1 tags to 68. So you could do font sizes for all sorts of things, where you could so by default all these, let's run this real quick. This is our kind of font sizes. But you can resize the size of your H1 elements if you want to. So with H1, we'll do font-size 68 pixels. And let's go ahead and copy this. The H1 to H6, just as a reminder, there's 6 headings. And so we'll go through, it's 68, then 52, then our H3 is 40. And then that's 32, 21, and 14. So there's our H4, which is 32. This is our H5, which is 21. And then here's our H6, which is 14. Alright, let's go ahead and run this. You'll see now our texts are all the new sizes. There we go. Whew. Words, man, they're hard. So font weight refers to how heavy the font is in terms of like how thick or thin you want the characters to be. So the heavier the font weight, the more the thickness of it, the greater the thickness. So we can go ahead and set the font weight of this as well. So one's going to be 800. These aren't pixels, just the font weight. Then we have a font-weight of, and make sure you notice we're going to notice the changes of these first 3 here. So font weight 600, 400, 300, 400, 500 is the next one. Finally, 400, 300, 200. All right, and now when we run this, you notice that our text got thicker on these first 2 here because we increased the font weight past where they were at. Now font-size is not limited to headings. You can do this for paragraphs as well. So we'll see our paragraph here, which is 10 pixels. We're going to increase it by 60%. It's going to take up a lot more of the screen now. It's 60% bigger by adding those extra 6 pixels. So there's also the line height property. Let's say you want a little bit more space between your paragraph tags. We're going to go ahead and set it to 25 pixels, and notice that our spaces in between our text here has now decided to get a little greater. Now let's say we don't want our anchor tags to be blue. By default they typically are. So when we run that, you'll see we have our blue anchor tag, and we're like, yo man, this is so AOL times. Like, no one has blue anchor links anymore, man. This is amateur hour. So making it look real bad, we can go ahead and set the color. And we'll set it to black, like so. The color of your anchor text should be black. Alright, apparently they want us to do it their way, which is #000, the shorthand hex value. Oh, I don't. Make sure you, of course, throw the element that you're trying to target. It is a Friday, guys. I've been working 5 days so far, so I apologize if I make little mistakes like that. You can also add the hover pseudo class. What that basically means is that when you hover over an element, you can only apply certain CSS style attributes, such as like tooltips or additional info, or maybe change the color. Now we're gonna go ahead and do that. So how do we apply that pseudo class of hover? You just put a colon, the element, and then, or the element, then a colon, then the effect. So, or the pseudo class. So what we want there is, look, when you hover over it, we want it then to become blue. And then we want the text decoration. So by default, this is underlined. The anchor text of color remain black, only at CS. We want the text decoration to remove the line. How do we remove how do we remove that text decoration or the line? It's text decoration none. Let's go to run that, and let's check it real quick. So you'll see when we hover over it, it's now blue, line is gone. This CSS is only applying on the pseudo class. Now it's going to be really important to get comfortable using those pseudo classes if you're not already. So we're going to talk about the CSS box model. What this basically refers to is you need to be able to position your elements accordingly. So in our H2 element, we're going to set the position property to relative. And we'll read what that is right now. When a position of an element is set to relative, it allows you to specify how CSS should move it relative to its current position on flow on the page. So it's basically saying it will interact with the other CSS on the page, more or less. And so it's willing to shift left or right based on what elements are surrounding it, which elements are relative to it. So we're going to set the position here, and we're going to set it to relative. And then we want to set the CSS. We want to offset to relative position H2 15 pixels away from the top from where it normally sits. So change position H2 to relative and use, so top, we're basically offsetting from the top by 15 pixels. And so when we run it, you'll see that it drops down. Oh, dang it. Before we do that, let's run this real quick. And so here we are. Here's our move me. And what we're going to do now is, you notice you have to define this position. I didn't say that, but you have to have a position. I think by default it inherits relative, or the default is normal flow. Okay. But you'll see that this moved down. It moved 15 pixels from the top. It doesn't move up 15 pixels to the top. It moves away from that by 15 pixels. So we want to move our H2 10 pixels upwards. So in this example, we would just go ahead and put bottom 10px, because again, we want to move it up, so we're pushing away from the bottom by 10 pixels. And we want to move it towards the right 15 pixels, so that would be the left. And so when we run it, what's going to happen is the move me is going to go up and to the right. And you'll see that's exactly what it did. So lock an element to its parents with absolute positioning. So what that basically means is an element becomes absolutely placed and cannot be pushed around by normal CSS factors like we showed case beforehand. and it's to its parent element, right? So to do that, you assign position position absolute, and so what we want to do is we have our search bar ID, which is our form, and then we want to give it the position. Let's go ahead and zoom in one more time. Position absolute, like so, and then we want to offset it by the top by 0 pixels. So we don't want any offsetting of 0 pixels to the top, and to the right of 0 pixels as well. So when we run this, oh, we probably should have run the test beforehand. Let's go ahead and run it real quick so we could see this. Oh, you don't really notice anything because it's already in place. But if it wasn't in place, it would definitely not be moved by other elements. Now fixed. Let's read the fixed position. And to be honest, I always get a little loopy when it comes to these positions, and sometimes for me it's a little bit of guess and check. But once you kind of get the hang of these things, you just have to use it a lot. Which is how coding is in general. So the text layout scheme the CSS offers is fixed position, which is a type of absolute position that locks an element relative to the browser window. So fixed locks it to the browser window, while absolute is locked to the parent element. So if it's located in a div, it's to that div, while fixed is absolute except on the window. Okay, so what we want to do here, so we have this, and we want to give our nav bar the position of fixed, and then we want to have top 0 pixels. I have to say, it is very nice that they give us they kind of clean up 3 lines here for us to put our code in. It's nice, saves us a couple of extra keystrokes. I don't have to do that. So you'll see right here, now with position fixed, we're putting it to the top, and we're putting it all the way to the left, and thus it jumps to the top of the window, to the document. Now, you can push things to the left or the right? So this home and this context is kind of weird. So what we want is the ID left. We want to float it to the left, meaning we want everything to go left. And then the right, we want to float, have our text go to the right. And when we run this, wait, what? They must have done some additional things here. Okay, so we're gonna float these things to the right. Oh, they did have sections, not the text. I'm sorry. So each one of these sections, one's going to the left and one's going to the right. So you'll see, bam. So that goes to the right now, and it's going to float around. So it's not going to drop down the same light. It kind of floats around as long as there's space. All right, so the z-index property allows us to position how our elements stack. Typically, the way that your HTML browser will do it is it will stack the most nested one on top. Now we can go ahead and assign the z-index value of 2 to this first element. So let's run this real quick. So you'll see we have a red and blue. So what's happening is, by default, we've already set not by default, we set the z-index 1. Now if we want the first one to go on top of it, the z-index needs to be larger than that. So in this case, we're going to pass 2. You'll see now our red is appearing on our blue. Now, if we want to center something, there's a couple ways we can go about it. The easiest way is to go ahead and just put center things based off the margin. We can go ahead and set margin to auto. And as long as no other elements are affecting it between going from this side to this side, it should center it just like we did right there. So we want to, what's the goal of this? Learn about complementary colors. Okay. So there's a lot of color schemes, and this is kind of something that I think you'll probably need to do more research about, where you can type in, you need to Google something like web complementary colors, and they'll bring up a bunch of color pickers, kind of show you what goes together on a palette. And a lot of themes will already have these built in like Angular Material or Bootstrap or something like that. But just do some research is kind of the main point. We don't have to dive into that too much. But blue and yellow go together quite nicely. So what we're going to do here is the div element with class blue. It's going to have a background color of blue. And then let's run this real quick. So we have blue, and then the yellow should have a background color of yellow. So blue and yellow looks nice together. Another great two colors to put together is cyan and orange, as well as raspberry. These kind of all go together relatively nice. So we can go ahead and put that in. In this case, we're going to pass in orange. Let's actually run this real quick. Orange, cyan is going to be cyan, and then we're going to have raspberry. Be raspberry. Oh, rasp. Excuse me. Raspberry. Oh, and of course they don't want us. They want us to use our hex colors. It looks like. So hex color cyan is this hex color. You can just copy and paste this in here. You don't really need to memorize it. If you do, God bless. I will never. But you can see these kind of all look nice, work together. So we're going to continue on kind of talking about complementary colors. We run here. Cooking with free code camp. Bunch of stuff on here. So this all black is about to look, and white is going to look a lot better once we add some colors. We want our header here to have this color. We run that. Bam, it's already looking like it's got a kick in the ass all of a sudden. And then we're going to add this complementary color to the background color of the footer. Let's go ahead and run this. And we'll jump down the bottom. You'll see now it kind of, this page is looking like it belongs together, and it's not an outdated newspaper or anything like that. And then we're going to set the color of the H2 element. It's going to add some flavor to it as well. You'll see now it's really, as my boss would say, we're cooking with gas. Which is something very strange to say, in my opinion. So the button element, we're going to, instead of white, we're going to go ahead and give it some flavor as well, and we're going to set it to orange. But it's a much nicer looking page than just the pure black and white. So we're going to talk about how to adjust the hue of a color. So your code should use the HSL property to declare the color green. So you can also declare colors via their hues by 0%, 50%, 100%, just pass in numbers, so on and so forth. But let's go ahead and, so green, so this is red, yellow, green. You'll see right here what value you have to pass in to get that. So instead of using background dash color, we can do this HSL and pass in a certain hue with our color as well, which is, excuse me, background dash color. Oops. Now this is not something that I've touched, but I have seen it. So we're going to change the color green here, and that's going to be 120, and then we're going to set the hue to 100% and 50%. Let's actually run this so we can see. So you see this green is slight. We set the hue, right? It's not our traditional green. And we're going to do the same thing for our cyan, which is black right now. And we want to set the hue of that as well. And our cyan to do that is 180 HSL. And in our example, we are going to pass in 100% and then 50%. We got a little nice hue of our cyan color. And finally, we're going to do the same for the color blue. Blue is 240 HSL. did HSL stand for? Stands for hue, saturation, and then lightness. Cool. So those are the values that goes into HSL. So blue is the 240. We're going to pass in 100% here as well, and then 50%. And we're going to have a nice blue. This can be off by our traditional blue. So you can also adjust the tone. So the navigation bar on this site, let's run this real quick. Has background color, so nav, saturation, 80%, 25%. So let's go ahead and change our nav. Where is our nav? Right here. And we're going to set the background color to HSL. And I don't even remotely remember I don't need to remember. It's right here. So we're gonna match this right here. It's gonna be set 178, 80%, and 25%. I may have to go back and look at what the actual color scheme is. You'll see it has this nice little hue, shadow kind of saturation effect, hue, saturation, and lightness. There we go. You think it would be easier since they called it HSL, but that just shows how bad I am. So you also have a linear gradient. So a gradient is where you kind of have two colors and then it transitions from this color to that color. That's all it is. It's another thing that we can do to the background property. We're going to do it in this div right now. So we're going to have a background, and in here we're going to use linear dash gradient, and you need to apply, similar to box shadow, quite a few things when you use the linear gradient. First, the degree. In our example, we're going to put 90 degrees. Then the first color, which will be red. Then the second color, which will be yellow. And then it looks like we can apply a third color as well, which is pretty cool, which will be RGB. And you'll notice that we can put in any one of these values, right? Or any style of the coloring. We can input the color in any fashion that we see fit. So that's our example. Oh, let's actually follow here. So we want to set it for 35 degrees. My bad. We then want to set the first color to hashtag CCFFF. And then we want to set the second color to hashtag FFCCCC. Just gonna run the test. And you'll see now we have this nice linear gradient going on here. It looks like I did not get my code perfect, so let's run this one more time, see what the deal is. It's because I forgot a semicolon. But you can see we have this linear gradient that goes from this sort of palish pink to this light blue. Definitely much better than just a solid background color. Something you should get comfortable with. Just kind of make your... This will really look good when creating a portfolio, better than just a solid color. So you can also do repeating linear gradients. Goes into a lot of detail here. The gist of it is you just need to understand how to pass in the values. So we're going to do background. You see the example here of repeating linear gradient. And you can see it does one linear gradient to the other, repeats, one linear gradient to the other, repeats, one linear gradient to the other, repeats, so on and so forth. So instead of 90 degrees, what we want to do, thank them for putting this in here, because this is going to be a pain to type. I appreciate that. We're now setting the 45 degrees. So 90 degrees, you kind of saw how it just goes that way, 45 degrees at an angle. And it go on so on and so forth. One color should stop at 40 pixels. So this is how far it should go before it stops. So one color should at 40 pixels. So I believe they want this one to be 40. Oops, no, yellow stops at 0 pixels. One color stops. So basically where you stop the color, so yellow goes 0 to 40. blue goes 40 to 80. Anderson. Oh. So it goes yellow, should be at 0 pixels. One color stop at 40 pixels should be yellow. Second color stop should be black. So let's reset this real quick. Okay, guys, I paused for a second here to kind of get a better understanding of what I was misunderstanding. But let's start fresh. So the first thing we want to do is change our degrees to 45 degrees because that's what the instructions say. Now, the way to think of this is that when you have these color stops, there's a starting color and an ending color, and you're transitioning to them. So in this yellow, 0 pixels is where it starts, and it goes to the blue pixel right here, which is 40, and it blends it together. Now, if we don't want that blend, and this is what was throwing me off, is we don't want that blend. We're saying start at the 0 pixel and go to the 40 pixel, yellow to yellow. So it's going to be a solid yellow like so. And we're going to do the same thing for the black here, where we're starting at 40 pixel, and then we're going to 80 pixels for the black. So what we're going to get is a black and yellow mesh, like so, which is pretty cool. It kind of looks at those good old idiot books, which I used to read all the time, for the record. Create a texture by adding a subtle pattern as a background image. So you can also add a background image to the body. Didn't mean to do a hint. Run test. So you can also add a background image here using the URL. How do you add a background image? Background URL. Pass in the the URL tag. Then when we run it, you'll see that we have this little background here. It's kind of hard to see, but they're like little squiggly lines. It's not like a cool cat photo. So say we wanted to scale the size of the image, we would use the transform attribute and the scale parameter, and we could do it to 1.5 times its normal size. So let's run this. You'll see we have these two little balls here. To show the difference, we're going to scale ball 2 to 1.5 times its size. Transform, scale, 1.5. Now this is where screen vector graphics will start being used more and more in the web. The reason for that, and this right now is just CSS, but you can use this on images as well. Screen vector graphics, the way that they're created is that they scale evenly, so it doesn't matter if it's the size of a penny or the size of an apartment. It should scale evenly and have no issues being transformed to that size because it uses geometry and basically it's designed so that it scales perfectly, depending on if you're using SVG images. So just something to keep in mind. Now the size of a div element should scale to 1.1 times when the user hovers over it. So remember how we were talking about our CSS, or our pseudo classes? We're going to do the same for here, which we're going to do div hover. Oh, excuse me, I am in the div here, not what I meant to do. Hover, and we're going to do transform, and this will actually scale it to just 1.1. And this is kind of a cool thing that they show this because, and we're going to show this because you just want a little bit of increase. You don't want it to be too blatant, but look, you go from here to here. And typically what you would do is you would add a slight animation effect so that this isn't so sudden. And this will really make your sort of page look a little more interactive, a little more user-friendly, and much more current, right? You could still have it like this is what you prefer, but typically what would happen is you would have an animation that maybe this 10% increase in size would happen over half a second or something like that. And I think that's probably where we're going in the future here. You can also skew things off the x and y axis. So typically things are perfectly like a coordinate system. Now we may want to have it slightly diagonal and things like that. And we're going to skew that using transform as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to skew the bottom by 24 degrees. The way that we do that is transform. That's the attribute. The parameter, if you will be skew x. And then we're going to throw in 2,4 here. 2,4 deg. Let's go ahead and run that. There's notes. What did it say? Oh, I hit hint. So you'll see now we're skewing off the ends of the attribute. Everything's now, it's not that they're getting chopped off. We're just kind of shifting, right? So imagine you have a, it's just like me, right? So I'm a tall, lanky guy. Normally I stand like this, but if I wanted to skew, I'd go, now I'm skewed X amount of degrees. I skew this way, X amount of degrees. I don't know if that's a great example, but that's the one we're going with. So it just leans the element in the opposite, skews it, right, in the opposite direction. All right, you can also be skewed along the y-axis as well. You do that with skew y. So we're going to do that to the top element, which again, its transform is the attribute, and then the value here will be skew y. And we're going to do that by negative 10 degrees as well. When we run that, you'll see that we're skewed upward now. It's not the sides of the value that is skewing, it's the y-axis is skewing. We're skewing like this. Before we were skewing like this and like this. Now we're skewing like this, up and down. Now we're getting into some of the cooler HTML5 stuff, and CS3 stuff. Or CS3 stuff is what we're getting into, which is the newer CSS. Newer, it's really quite old, but the stuff that if you never touched CSS and you never moved into really getting kind of the next level, this is kind of the stuff that we've been talking about. So background color, you can also set this property to be transparent. Border radius property, the value border radius. All right, so what we want to do, let's run this real quick. So we have this. We're going to add a border radius of, remember, 50%. We'll set things to be circles. We'll do this piece by piece, which is kind of how I like to do my CSS so that we know. So you'll see now these are circles, and we want to set the background color to transparent. Let's go ahead and run that. You'll see now we got rid of that color, and it's kind of looking like a moon, kind of cool. And we're going to add a box shadow effect of 25 pixels for offset X, 10 pixels for offset Y, a 0 for blur radius, or 0 for blur radius, 0 for spread radius. We're going to do 0, 0. I don't think we have to have PX. I'm not sure though. We'll find out in a second. There we go. So we got rid of the blur radius, we got rid of the spread radius, and then we just kind of have this curved moon. It's basically just multiple CSS interacting with multiple elements right there. Pretty cool. So you can kind of design shapes based off your CSS. So let's see, lots of stuff going on here. So you have the before and after. One of the most popular shapes is heart shape, but you need to understand the colon before and the after selectors. These selectors are used to add something before or after a selected element in the following example. So it kind of makes sense, right? You have this element and you're saying whatever comes before, target it, and whatever comes after, target it. Because maybe perhaps you don't know what it's going to be, but you know you can set it up in the CSS. So we have our, let's run this real quick. So we have this and we have this. And so our heart is our div right here. And we're saying before the div, target that. So basically on the left hand side and the right hand side. And what we want to do is the heart after should be pink. We're going to change this. So this will now be pink. And the border radius for hard after should be 50%. All right. Run that. So you see, it kind of looks like a finger, I guess, maybe. And then the transform property. And a lot of times if you're trying to create like complex shapes like this, I'd be very impressed if you memorized all of them, but there's so many that it's really just a Google search away to kind of find this. So, so what class are we putting this to? The heart class, excuse me. So we're going to put in our transform here. We're going to add rotate, because you can rotate things as well. And we're going to do that by negative 45 degrees. And you'll see now we're kind of rotated like one like so. And then the content of the heart before selector should be an empty string. Okay. I have no idea why that's an empty string though. Let's read this. When the before and after selectors add shapes, the content property is still required, but it's set to an empty string. Okay, so apparently this is just something in CS3 that we have to have in here to get this to work. This is strange, but apparently that's what we have to do. But that's how you, all this code right here, which is why I would say that you have to look this up, not to memorize it. We have 3 classes here with what? From line 3 to line 35, 32 lines of code to make this heart shape. Which is why I don't worry about like memorizing that stuff too much. It's more about the general concept of, hey, I know I can make CS shapes in CSS. Let's go ahead and look that back up real quick. So we have our element with the ID of rect, and we want to have an animation name property with the value of rainbow. So we were talking about animations just a second ago. So here's our square, our rectangle, and we're gonna add an animation. Are we doing a keyframe animation to it? I believe we can do keyframes outside of it. Yeah. So what this at keyframes is, it kind of names your animation. It's, imagine storing an animation value, and all it's basically doing is we're saying at keyframes, and we're basically saying, look, our keyframes, in the example here, colorful, we're naming our animation, and then you'll see right here we pass it in to the animation name. Then we can set the animation values and things like that. And traditionally, how animations go is it goes from a 0% to 100%. So when you start the animation, and when you end the animation, so animation starts here, and then it animates to the end at 100%. Does what it needs to do, right? So at keyframes, and we are calling our animation the element animation property with a value of rainbow. So I believe we're calling this rainbow. And what we're doing here is animation dash name rainbow, and let's go ahead and run this piece by piece because this is gonna get a little complicated. And then the element of an ID with rect should have an animation duration of 4 seconds. So here we are defining how long this animation should take place. 4 seconds. Now we haven't defined what the animation does. So like nothing's happening. We're going to define that right now. So what we want to do is at 0%, where's the 0? At 0%, we want to have the background color be blue. And then at 50%, so notice we can actually do multiple, it's not just 0 to 100, you can add multiple ones as well. We're in the background color green, and then at 100% it should be yellow. So how this should work is once we set the background, once we trigger the animation, it's going to start off at blue at 2 seconds because 50% duration's 4 seconds. It's going to turn green, and when it finally hits 4 seconds, it's going to turn yellow. That's basically all that our animation is going to do. right, let's go ahead and run our test. And you'll see right there our animation. And because the way our animation is set up is that it should run every time we run our code, one time. Typically, you probably want to have an animation that runs on click or something like that. But we'll kind of go over that right now. So use CSS animation, change the hover state of button. Remember we were talking about doing this when we had that one with the scaling effect to it. So what we want to do now is the keyframes should use the animation name background color. Okay, so we have background color. Now we need to go ahead and define background color. Again, remember keyframes. Such a weird name. This refers to animation, which isn't intuitive if you never used like Adobe After Effects. The keyframes are where you start the animation and where you end the animation. So that's what that refers to. I think of it as a variable, but you're basically naming the keyframes. And the name for this is background dash color, which is an awful name because it's the same name as an attribute, but that's what the name is here. And we are instead going to be passing in, we're going to say, let's see, we're just going to say at 100%. Is that what you're saying? There should be one rule under keyframes that changes the background color to, okay, so all we want to do here is at 100%, we want to set background dash color to whatever this color is, 4791DO. Let's run this. And so what happens when we hover over it, you'll see that it changes color. And it runs after half a second, then it stops. Excuse me. So modify fill mode of an animation. So this is what we were talking about. It resets every half second, which isn't what we want. So we're going to instead do something that it's called animation fill mode property forwards. The animation fill mode specifies the style applied to the element when the animation is finished. So animation fill mode forward, set the fill mode property button to hover to forward so the button stays highlighted when the user hovers it. Okay. So we have hover. So button hover. And what we're doing here is we're going to set animation dash fill dash mode to forwards. And what this should do, if I understand it correctly, is this animation fill mode forwards is going to allow once the animation hits the end, it's not going to run the animation again. It's going to keep this filled the color that we want it to be. Create movement using CSS animation. So far all we did was change the background color, but you can do a lot more than that with animation. So what we want to do is we now want to set let's run our test real quick, get the most updated HTML here. So you'll see that this is now moving. Instead of going from top to bottom, we want it 0% to offset left at 0 pixels. And I'm not sure if they want us to get rid of the top. They don't. So there's that. And then finally we want to at 50% offset by 50 pixels. And then finally at 100% we want to left offset by negative 25 pixels. Oh, excuse me, this is 25 pixels as well. So you'll see we're going left to right like so. Kind of like a little Mario game. But so you can move elements as well with animation. So what we want to do now is we can, and you can kind of see how you can now start all the CSS that we learned, like opacity, we can go ahead and set these values here. And these keyframes, just this percent, we're passing the keyframes into the animation name, and then we're kind of defining what takes place at each percentage point. So at 50%, it kind of fades color. So you'll see right here, it's fading the color ever so slightly by down to about 90% less than its value, or 0.1, I should say. So you can also set how many times you're actually going to iterate through the animation. So you can set it to infinite. You can also set it to 3 or 1 or 2 or whatever you want it to be. Let's go ahead and set it to infinite. So we are going to jump into here, and instead of 3, when we run this right now, it's going to bounce 3 times. Pretty cool animation if you ask me. But we're going to have this bounce infinite amount of times. So it's just going to keep going. You'll see it'll go past 3. It'll go on as long as your browser is open. As we can see right now. Let's go ahead and run this real quick. Maybe I'll put it into that. So we have all our heart CSS again. And what we want to do now is we want to go ahead and give the heart class an infinite scaling as well. So let's jump up to our animation dash iteration count. I appreciate that they gave these some very detailed names. Like, you can kind of guess what animation iteration count is, but that is a lot of text to type out. So we're going to do the same thing. Let's run this one time. So it's going to go bam, bam. And we're going to do the same thing for the heart back class. And we're going to add it as infinite as well. Animation dash iteration dash count. And we're going to add that as infinite as well. It's going to run that. And so you'll see that it's changing color, so on and so forth, going from one color to the other. So you can kind of combine a bunch of animations as well. So the at keyframes rule for the star-1 class should be 50%. Let me understand what they're trying to get us to do here. So to illustrate the animation consists of 2 stars that each decrease at size. You can change the keyframes rule for one of the elements so they twinkle at different rates. Okay, so what we want to do, all that this is basically saying is that you don't have to have all your animations at the same rates. So what's going to happen is one's going to twinkle at 20% and one's going to twinkle at 50%, so that it's going to throw each one of these off. Now the duration of it is still the same, and if we kind of mess with it, it might be a little bit better to kind of see. We'll run this real quick. You'll see one is duration, like this one is taking 5 seconds than the other one, but all that's really happening is that they're just changing sizes at different points, but still over the same amount of duration. So the animation duration, so you don't have to have the same duration, the same anything with your animations, which is kind of the point of this. The animation property for the star class 1 should remain at 1 second. Okay, so star 1 is going to remain at 1. Star 2 is going to be 0.9 seconds, and then star 3 is going to be 1.1. Okay, so 0.9, and then we are also, oh nope, that's 1.1, and then this is 0.9. So now we'll get a better idea, kind of what I just showcased, more or less. And you'll see they're all kind of popping off slightly at different times. Kind of hard to tell. Animation timing function controls how quickly an animated element changes over the duration of the animation. Okay, so there are a number of predefined keywords. So there's some keywords here. Also, another great course for this is Solo Learn CS3 class. I have some videos up on that. I've done the course, and it goes over animations and details as well if you're looking for additional materials. So the animation timing function property for the element should be ID ball1 should be linear, meaning it goes the standard route, and then ball2 should ease out. Other options include ease out, which is a quick beginning that slows in, or ease in, which is slow in the beginning. So it's basically ease out is quick in the beginning that slows down, and then ease in is the opposite. So what we're going to do is show linear for ball 1. We're going to have animation dash timing dash function, and this is going to be linear. Let's go ahead and run this real quick to see the difference, right? So linear, it's just a linear fall, and then so you'll see that it's falling equal, right? That's what it means by linear. It's not speeding up, it's not doing anything. Meanwhile, here we want our animation dash timing, and notice how we don't actually have all this in one CSS ID or one CSS class, because it's inheriting this from the class. It's inheriting the bulk of the animations CSS from the balls class, and we're defining the IDs with additional values. This wouldn't work by itself, obviously, or without the keyframes, which are getting defined right here. So here we're going to do ease out. So you'll see it kind of picks up pace, slows down. Alright, so we are in Applied Visual Design, learn how Bezier curves work. Bezier curves are another type of timing function for animation. Let's run this real quick. We should fail. So you'll see it kind of seems like everything's going the same, but now what we're going to do is we're going to have the linear equivalent of the Bezier curve that is going on for ball 1. So where's ball 1? So we are going to, let's look at our example here, cubic dash Bezier, and we are going to say 0.25, 0.25, 0.75, and 0.75. Alright, so this is the linear equivalent. The cubic Bezier, let's read over this real quick though, is basically another function where you have an x1, a y1, and an x2 and a y2. And what all you're basically doing is setting a coordinate with the x and y location and a coordinate with x and y location. So this is coordinate 1, this is coordinate 2. And you're saying, I want the animation to start here, and I want it to go from here to here. So before we've been kind of assigning top and bottom, but this gives you another way of trying to set the linear effects. So we're setting top and bottom in this fashion. So this is where it starts. This is our x, this is our y, and then this is where we want it to go. That's why it goes in a straight line, because the values match. So we're gonna change the red button here, or the red one, and instead of linear, we are going to give it a cubic Bezier. I apologize if I'm saying this incorrectly. Bezier, I believe, is how it's supposed to be pronounced. 0, 0, 0.58, and 1. And so let's run this real quick so we can see. It looks like the rest of it is all set up. So everything's going at the same rate as everything else. Very nice. So the property of the element with ID green should be cubic Bezier x1, y2. Okay, so we'll go in green, run our tests. So for green, we want it to instead be, kind of see the difference. So you can see it starting from the bottom, going to the top. Start from the bottom, now I'm here. Let's go ahead and change these values to be, and also you can actually go as many places as you want, although each one is 1/10 less than, so I don't think we've gone to 3 digit sets, but you can go as many as you want. It's not going to make much of a difference. after a certain point though. And then finally 1.649. And let's go ahead and run this. It's going a little bit faster, a little bit more smooth. Everything's looking pretty good. Going a little bit higher than it was before. If you notice, it's going almost all the way to the top. And that is it. We finished the... Oh my god, I forgot the name of it. It's been so long. We finished that section. That's what's important. I hope you guys found this helpful. We just got done doing the responsive web design, specifically the applied visual design. Up next, we'll be working on applied accessibility. This section will cover how to basically make our websites more accessible to people with learning disabilities, visual, auditory, mobility, cognitive, as they say here. This is really important because when you're a lot of jobs, there's certain standards you have to meet. This is typically one of them, especially as a developer who works with the government or for government's agencies. It's kind of required that we meet a certain accessibility standard, as you should, right? You want your product to be used by as many people as possible. But as always, guys, thank you for watching. If you want to support me, you can at patreon.com/codingtutorials360. And if you want to join our Facebook group, it's Code Tech and Caffeine. The link is in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I appreciate all the support. Hey guys, thanks for watching the video. If you're interested in coding bootcamp, check out devmountain.com, where housing is included in your price of tuition. And don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and support me on Patreon. I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.